All right, everyone. Welcome today to today's Omaha Data Science Academy class. I'm the professor Jeremy Bergman, and this is a class called Writing Queries. So this is an introduction into using the SQL programming language for the first time to be able to write code to get results back that you want from tables within databases. So really like your hello world and your basics to being able to obtain data from or obtain results from data that's already stored within the database. In future classes, we'll learn how to store that data in database. For now, we're going to pull out data that's existing. It really starts to give you a feel for the programming language itself and how it works. All right. So I mentioned the syllabus. What I like to do at the beginning of each class is review, since it builds on each other, review what we did in the last class and what we're going to do in this current class. It's kind of like your path forward, backwards, and forwards each step. Once a week, we'll take quizzes over the previous week. That's also like reviewing the previous week because it's easy to forget things over a format of it. So in the first class, we learned about really like the lingo and what the need for this data manipulation and management and using SQL to be able to do that. We initially talked about what a SQL query is. Tonight, we'll actively be able to code in SQL and get our hands on it and really use it. And that's how you'd obtain structured data using SQL queries. We learned terminology like what's a relational database, what's a table. We even learned about server. I think we learned about a few other things like view. Data is structured within a table like an Excel sheet. So it's tabular in nature in relational databases. So it's really intuitive for people. A table structured with columns, which are like the variables you select, and then each row or record, which is a value for across all those columns. It's usually related to some type of transaction, like or some type of complete record. So a transaction would be, like we talked about last time, like a financial transaction of some type or a credit card transaction. Or it could be something like we'll see in the world database. It'll be information about a country. So it'll be an entire record about a single country. Maybe it's Russia. It'll have a population. It'll have the language spoke and so forth. And then the columns will be named the according variables. So you'll use the SQL programming language to be able to call those columns and get back all of the rows and columns. We learned about common SQL data types. Given that you can use decimals or integers or long text strings, you can come close to loading any type of data that you want into a table, into the rows and columns of a table. The most common SQL data types, like I was saying, text, numbers, character strings. You'll also have Boolean, which is 1 or 0 or true and false. You'll use those a little bit in SQL also. And we provided a lot of resources for how you could learn more about SQL. And at the end of each lecture, we'll do that and it'll be relevant to the material. So here at the end of this lecture, it'll be like ways that you can learn more about queries and interactive tutorials and so forth. All right. The objectives for this class is that it's really exciting. We get to use the SQL programming language. You don't even really have to be like a Java programmer, take a whole semester course to do that. We can go ahead and do that in the second class. We can do basics in the second class. I think the best way to do SQL for me personally is just to start playing around with it and like really exploring like what different functions are, what the different clauses or statements do, or what you can do with data, because then it starts to put it like on paper. You can really see like what data that you're bringing back and what you're doing with the code. We'll practice using common SQL clauses. We'll also practice using common aggregations and SQL functions. I talked about that a little bit offline. These are the type of things that sum an entire column or average an entire column. Or they'll change individual values within a column. They'll go row by row and change individual values. We'll learn logical statements and operators. These are like if-then statements or case statements. So there's conditional logic that you can do in SQL, or operators just like addition and subtraction, like mathematical, and some string operators. We'll practice using comments for debugging or explaining code. This is super helpful, especially when queries get complicated. We'll start to get more and more complicated. These will be mostly straightforward today, but as they get more complicated, really nice to be able to come out parts of it, run the code and see what it gives you, then slowly add things in. Or just in general, saying what the code does. It's always good to be able to write comments for other people who might see the code in the future. And then practice using SQL examples in MySQL Workbench. So we'll try to get to that as fast as we can today so we can really get some good practice in. Right. So what is a query? A query is in SQL, a query is a request to the database for data to answer a question. So when we query databases, we use common language to get information, is SQL or SQL or structured query language, whichever one you want to call it. All three is good. What you'll find with SQL is like it will start to lend itself very well to how people speak or how people ask questions, especially like with select and from, like we saw in our initial hello world query, where we did select star from world.cities, and that got us all the columns from the world.cities table. And that would be like saying in natural language, like, give me all of the cities in the world that are in the database table. There are other clauses in there too. You'll use these very often, but the select and from, that's a minimum requirement that must be in every SQL query, because you need to tell the SQL database what, at the very least, what information do I want? So what columns do I want from what database table? And then things like where is like your limiting conditions. So you could say where state is Nebraska, and it'll return you information just about Nebraska. So where really shortens the length and the number of records that are returned. Group by is used when you're using summary functions. Having is a little bit less used, and we'll see examples of this, but this is where you use a summary function, and then it's like a where for a summary function. So you'd say like a state having a population that's less than 1 million if we summed over like all the cities in the state. Order by is like it says, it orders all of the results in a column, either by numeric or alphabetical order, in ascending or descending order. And then you can limit the number of records. So I often use it to say, just give me the first 10 records out of the table. I just want to see what the information looks like. That's a really good way of doing that. Instead of having to load the whole table and see the first 10 or the first 100 results, and really get a good feel for the data that's in the table. All right. So we have our first example. So it has obtain a list of countries within the continent of Asia. So you can see very like natural language, like a question that somebody would ask, or this one's commanding you to do it since it doesn't have a question mark. But this is how you would do it. So you'd select countries, and there's a field called name, and we can use an alias. So that as says, let's, instead of calling that name, let's call it country. From the world.country table. So we have our limiting condition where continent is equal to Asia. You can see it just brings back Asia results. And you can order those results by continent and country. And we're doing that descending, so it's in reverse alphabetical order, starting with Yemen. And then it says, just give me the top 10 results. So if you run that query, there should be a query that's in the notes section of each one of these. You should be able to copy and paste the query that's in here into MySQL Workbench and run it. If not, there's also a file that I provided before class that a SQL file that you can load into MySQL Workbench. And give me a moment to bring that up. It is in Slack. It is called, I'll go ahead and show this to the class. It is in Slack. And if you download it, it is named Examples PowerPoint. So this has all the examples that are in the slides. It's just in a SQL file that you can load into MySQL Workbench, and it goes across all of the lectures. So if I open this up, you can see it goes lecture 1, lecture 2, slide 10. So not just copying and pasting it out of the slide notes, because we've come across a few things that are weird when people copy and paste it, but this should be a working file for you. And what's nice about Slack, it gives you this nice format that you could either download the file or you could just copy and paste. So should be this query. That we can put in MySQL Workbench. Your MySQL Workbench should look similar to this with your database and then the world database. You won't have as many as I do. But if you click on it, it'll give you the same results. So as you follow along, you can either use that file or copy the queries out of it to run it. I'll usually give everybody a moment to do that, as I will do right now if you'd like to try to run it. Work for everybody? Work for you?
It's like 10.
Yeah, and you can play around with that and see what different results hit. So if I were to do something like remove that limit.
Re-enter the password from time to time, or might be a connectivity. So do I have to say save password in the vault?
You can save password in the vault. So if you remove that 10, then you get a lot more than returned.
Yeah, there's what's that limit set by? Is it just the alphabetical or?
Oh, that limit, I just set it as the first 10.
Oh, the first, okay.
So it returns 51, but if you do a limit of 10, you only get the first 10. I mostly did it for illustrative issue here.
Gotcha.
But sometimes you could sort a column. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and descending gives it that. So if I were to,
Yeah, I see that.
it orders first by continent and then country. So kind of like Excel, you can sort by 2 columns. Now you can do it using code.
And so adding the hashtag sign kind of like, what do you call it? It kind of hides it. It's kind of like in HTML when you kind of put a comment out. Yes.
Yep.
Comment out, yeah.
Yep, comments. So now you can leave like little notes. I like to leave little notes on what each line is doing. And then what slide it came from in the lecture. So I found that was helpful for us to do for students. All right. I'll go ahead and keep moving forward. And feel free to play with those because you can all, if you do something wrong, you can always re-download it. Okay. We'll keep moving. So that is your, other than the one we did to set it up, that's how the SQL queries work in its most basic form. SQL clauses. So SQL clause defines the order of execution of a SQL query along with the required operations to obtain data from a relational database. So there is an order of execution for the SQL clauses. So it looks at your main clauses like we had in that first. It looks to see what's in there, and then the database decides what executes first and second. From is the first thing that it does. It always looks for the table, and then it does the select, and then it does where after that, and then group by. So if you think about it, so you're selecting the table, then you're telling it to select the columns, and then you do where, which limits the number of columns, and then you apply your functions to it or sum. So you'd limit it down to like do sum the population of all cities in the United States with greater than 1 million, people in it, greater than 1 million population. So what it'd do, it'd look at the table, it'd take all the cities, it'd sum their populations, or it'd do the where statement first and limit it to only the cities with 1 million, and then it would sum it up after that. So there are also joins. We'll learn about that a little more later. That's where we talked about on Monday, where you can take data and start to blend it together that are in separate tables. So that's usually you join on a key. You can do different types of joins. We won't go into it too much here, but you can either join them directly or you can join them where they match, or sometimes even where they don't match. And they'll give you some interesting results. So the where clause, these are mostly like your logical operators, so you say where city is not in Canada or something. Give me all the cities in the world that aren't in Canada or are not in the United States. And you can do which is inclusive. You could say, give me all the cities in US and Canada. Where country is equal, I should say country is equal to US and country is equal to Canada. You could do or, so it's, well, that doesn't actually make sense because the and would be, you have to have both conditions be true. So better example of that would be, give me the cities where country is equal to the United States and the population is greater than 1 million. Say the or is the one that I was talking about before. So you'd say, give me all cities in the United States or give me all cities in Canada. And that would combine both of them. So and is you have to meet both conditions, or is that you meet either one. We'll use like statements later. Those are specific to where the country is like United, and then you get United States. It can be between values, in a set of values. You can use all these greater than, less than operators, or you can use null, so that says where the value has no value.
What's the exclamation mark equal sign?
Not equal to.
Oh, it's not equal. Okay.
Yep. So inside of your select statement, you can do distinct, so you can return just the distinct values in that column. That can be useful if you have duplicate values in a column. We'll see that in our exercise. You can use as an alias to a column, like we did in our example. And case statements, we'll be using those a lot, especially for cleaning data and manipulating data. That's where you can put in logic, a series of logical steps, and where it meets it, you can return a value. And then you have your aggregate functions, like we talked about, the ones that summarize over the entire, all the values, all the rows over in a column. All right. So that looks like the same query. The SQL operators. Not today, getting a little bit of a late start. But the operators is a comparison. It's a mathematical symbol, which is used to compare two values, usually in the where or select. The where clause is like we were just talking about. You'd say where country is equal to Canada. And then you could use the equal sign for comparison. Or you could say something like if country, the select city where country is in Canada, United States, or Mexico. And it gets you all those results because in is set inclusive. You have likes and nots and ors. These are almost always used in where clause, but they can be used other places too. Arithmetic can be used in, I use them in select statements and where statements. So where you'd use them in select, say you wanted to return the value of a column where you subtracted two columns together. Maybe one is if you're doing finance or if you're doing supply chain, maybe one's a revenue and the other is a cost. So you want to get like a gross margin. You could subtract two columns. You could do revenue minus cost as gross margin. You could even use these inside of the where statement. Commonly, you do that with time. So you'd say where the date is greater than like today minus 10 days. And we'll see some more concrete examples of these coming up. SQL functions. We have three different types of functions. I briefly explained this, but this goes into a little more depth. So we have aggregate functions, a type of functions that summarize over the entire column. We have your averages, your counts, your sums, your mins and maxes. And I think that's in string. I was trying to think of how that would be an aggregate function. I might put that in the wrong place. But you have control flow functions. These are like your case, if, or if null. That's your if then type logic. So think of control flow as like in a programming language, you're trying to say if this condition is true, do this, otherwise do that. And then case is like multiple. You can have like multiple values. And you'll see more examples of those, but those are control flow in SQL. And those work a little bit different than they do in programming languages because it really evaluates like each row and then says if the column is equal to this, then do this, otherwise do that. So it's really like iterative function, like a scalar function that goes through each value. Comparison functions. These are functions that compare two columns to each other. So you can coalesce, which is like a concatenate. You could take two values and the first like non-null value, it would put as a beginning and then it concatenate others to it. Your is null checks to see if the value is null. And then it would compare it. You could compare it to something else and then get a result. And we'll see more we'll practice some place where we can practice some examples of those. And then scalar functions. The most common types so scalar functions are functions where you apply to each value and the rows that you return in a table. So the most common ones I use a lot of date and time functions. So you can get the current date and just return that. You can do the difference between two dates. That's where you do, if we're doing a lot of my are supply chain related, I've spent a lot of time in that. So the difference between the date purchased and the date shipped, you can see how many days it took to ship an item. Date add, that's where you can compare the current date minus 10 days, where you can get the date and the time of right now. You can see how that works, or you can get daters, and there are quite a few more than this. There's a grill at mysqltutorial.org, SQL functions. These are just the most common ones and giving you a quick explanation of what they do. Use math functions, floor, round, or ceiling, getting the next closest integer, or you can actually specify to what decimal place you want to get a ceiling or floor, or the round function, you can do that also. Then data types. So the cast function helps you convert a data type into another data type as long as it's able to be converted. So say you had string value and it has all numbers in it, you could, and it's not a decimal number, it's like an integer, and then you can work with it as an integer. That's also common in dates. You'll get text in from some system, you'll give it to you it as a string, and you could potentially cast that as a date, so you can start working with it as a date in your queries. So I'll give you one example of aggregate functions, and then we'll take a quick break. We're packing a lot here into 30 minutes. So an aggregate function, what is the total world population by continent? So this is an aggregate function. So this is going to from world.city, world.country. You always, when you do an aggregate function, you always use a group by. So grouping by continent, you're going to group by continent, and then you're going to summarize all the values over continent. So not just the entire column, but all the cities within Asia, all the cities within Africa, Europe, North America, South America, Oceania, and they even had Antarctica there. But since you selected to do it, to group it by continent, you'll have to do group by continent. And then the halving is where we mentioned that as one of the clauses. If you did the sum of population is greater than 0, it eliminate this result of Antarctica equals to 0. And then you can order by continent descending, which we'll do that in alphabetical order. Go ahead and run that query. You can pull that out of the notes or that file is provided. I'll go ahead and pull it out of that file.
Because the file is better than copying it off the PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, we found like when people were copying it out.
If I did
Right.
PowerPoint.
You
That's
did
what
it
I-
on the PowerPoint, or you
I did originally, and then it wasn't working. So
That's what we found that like
last time?
when people copied and pasted it, sometimes copy like weird
So
characters into it and it
posted
wouldn't
that
work.
thing in the-
Yep. So let me,
Have the stream now. Is Do I have to go on the StreamYard to find the notes?
On the Slack.
It's in
Yeah, that's where I'm-
Slack. This PowerPoint SQL one, you can download that and open it up in
Oh, at 249, way up.
in Workbench.
I was looking at a recent, okay.
Or Slack is kind of nice. You can click on the file and it's already formatted as code for you, so you can copy and paste it out of there. That's the advantage of Slack, is that it's originally made for programmers to communicate with each other. So if you put code into it, it still has like that code
So,
format.
What did you do to get it over the file details? You just tapped on it?
Yeah,
On the PowerPoint one or the
click to view
the
details.
exercise one?
The PowerPoint one. So if I do the exercise, that will be the exercises at the end of this lecture.
Click
So
to
it's
view
this
details.
one,
Yeah,
yep.
okay, got it. And it's slide 9.
Yep. And as I change the slides up a little bit, I have to remember to keep these numbers right, but it should be approximately slide 9. So if I copy and paste that here,
You did
Enter
run
in
a
it.
query run, did you take select from world city?
world.country.
World.country, from my dad's city.
There is a world.city.
Okay, but you deleted that, or you had us test it, you just had us delete that and put the new stuff in.
Yeah. So one thing that's helpful when I'm doing a query, like I mentioned, you can also do this in the editor. To go to world.country, select the top thousands, okay. You can see like the original format of this. So what we're doing is that we're grouping by continent and summing over all those values. In South America, so you can see they have like North America, Europe, Asia, and then summing over the populations. So in Europe, it would include these two and all the other records
Mhm.
would see Europe. So it'd add that one, it'd add this one, it'd add that one, and so forth to get this result. Is that 73 million?
Cool.
So it's not going to be quite, of course, the actual populations, because they just include like the biggest cities. But it still illustrates like what the query is doing on this table.
And you said that what you call for in the group by has to match what you call for in select, so continent, continent.
Yep.
Okay,
So if you were summing or doing the aggregates over a field, or you could do multiple fields, you could do, let's go ahead, do this, and then, was it name as country? Let's see, columns. Yeah. So let's say like, of course, name is a keyword in MySQL, so that's why it appears in blue.
And then column.
We'll want to also group by that too.
Let's put the bracket around, is that correct, or?
Yeah. And if it's not a bracket, it's backward ticks.
It's what?
It's this one over by the 1.
And it's the same on both sides?
Yeah. This is just like a little thing that's specific to MySQL. If you give select a column that has a keyword in it. Let's see, what did I do? Expression number 2 of select list is not in your group by. Oh, because I put it in order by. I don't want to do that. Even the pros put things in their own spot sometimes.
Group by comment.
And name. So this should be name is like the name of the country. So now it's going to start grouping by name and continent. And that'd probably be okay to even order by that also after you group it. Order by is the very last thing that the query does. So after you get all of your results,
So why do you have to
then
put
you
the
order by
comma
those
after
last two.
name on select, but you don't have to put the comma after group by, or you run it and so you don't know that you don't.
Oh, I do have the comma.
After name. You have it after up on the select.
Oh, because it's not the last one in the column that we're selecting in the select.
Okay, so you're summarizing by group.
And then the sum is the last column that we're returning in our set. And these are the last, name is the last one I have in the group by and the order by. There. We'll get a result here. Zendel, did you have a question? Sometimes the sums can take just a second. So now we're doing it over continent and country. So it's like all this in the continent of Asia and the country Turkey. There's some of the population of the cities.
Is the tick that you're using, is it the one in the upper left or
Mhm.
which?
Took a drink as you're saying that. It's all over by the one almost always.
Yeah,
It's like a back tick underneath the tilde.
yeah, I use that one, but I'm getting it.
I'm getting there too under having. What's that? Aggregate. Zero, grit. It's what is.
And feel free if anyone wants to share their result. Good.
Oh, that's probably the problem.
Oh, I figure out how StreamYard works here.
Comment after me.
Up at the top one or which?
Yeah, the first line.
Yeah.
The others are at the end, it doesn't have anymore.
Did anybody online have any?
That's what happened, that was.
Questions?
Syntax drives me.
I know.
It can be the smallest thing in SQL. I don't know how many times I've like stared at a piece of code for like an hour and I'm like, I swear everything is right in this. Especially when they get complicated. And then like finally you see it, like your eyes go by it like 10 times. That's always just practice and getting used to it. The area, if you're missing something,
Blow that up.
Because he forgot to submit one after your code. I'm like, I didn't forget it.
After- yeah. Thank you, Rosenda. You can see the code again here. I added name to it, and name is what they called the country. So when you're building a table, you really don't want to name it as a keyword, but they did here. So that's why we put those tick marks on it. And that's the tick marks that are next to the tilde on the
So this.
on your keyboard.
How can I make my view bigger?
Control scroll.
Control what?
Let's see, you don't have mouse control. Usually control scroll will do it, but I don't know how to do it. Oh, maybe with your,
Well, I've got this right window, the context or the snippets. I don't.
or if you. Oh, I thought maybe if you, I thought you could zoom in, but.
Stay on this for a
I'm
second.
just making the box bigger. And
And I'll let everybody go ahead and take
Is there a magnifying glass there?
work on this and take a 15-minute break, because we actually, in this class, we don't have a lot more to cover other than the other two types of functions that you can use. So just with this class alone, you have quite a bit of power in your hands already. We haven't learned case statements yet, but we should do that, and we do that in the next class. Actually, peek ahead, we should. And I'll go ahead and leave this query up here during a quick break. I'll be here to answer questions. Actually leave. Yeah, I'll leave my SQL workbench up there.
Can you go into the preferences and like make your font size bigger?
Yeah,
If you don't, because if you have a mouse, you can like control and scroll, but it says you have to restart it to have it take effect.
you can zoom. Helps a little bit, but there is
Honestly, that-
actually in almost all these things.
On the hide sidebar, that's what I want to do. That's a review.
Yeah, I don't. Mine keeps appearing, and I'm not.
I know, hide sidebar. Nope, I don't want the sidebar, I want the right one.
Oftentimes in these text editors and these IDEs, you can change the font.
I couldn't, because it's on the surface. Secondary or something.
Reformat the
There,
SQL
it's the
script.
secondary
Beautify it.
But I can even just stretch it with my
That's their
fingers.
preference. What's
Oh,
that?
there's a magnifying glass right there. No, that's the font. No, that's a font. That's not.
Control.
I just was able to use my touch screen and expand.
Yeah, usually what I do is I hold control and then I do the mouse.
Mhm. I was seeing
Have
the
to
screen all
actually-
right, but I couldn't see. I can't see.
I actually have to
With my
Remember
readers, that's why I got the readers to see close up.
remember what the key combination is for Zoom,
Mhm.
because I always just use my mouse.
Close.
Oh, maybe plus, maybe you're right. I was like thinking like little arrow,
I was just Google searching it, but that seems right. Good try.
but I don't know.
Control Shift plus. Ooh, that's a little too much. I broke it. Uh-oh.
Can you use it now? Now it's like weird.
Oh man, what did I just do? I just broke my laptop trying to do that. That's what I get.
Can't have anything nice.
Can't have technology.
Yeah.
Gosh, what did I just do?
It always bites us.
Oh no, that made it worse.
What's everyone else saying?
Probably just that. Oh, I guess at least I have a phone. Sorry, everyone who's on StreamYard there. Just trying to figure out the hotkey for Zoom. Windows hotkey, unzoom, or zoom out. I think it is the zoom in. It must be Windows Shift plus sign. Windows logo key. Okay. Windows logo key and minus sign is all it should be. Ah, there we go. Windows plus and minus, that's right.
Just the Windows plus and minus, that's it?
Yeah.
No shift? Oh.
Yeah, no shift. Hope I still have everyone here. John K, have any questions? So John had a good question. So for our homework assignment, we will copy, you'll see where we copy these tables over to your schema. But for now, the world database has, so just select access on it. So it's okay for the class to just write a query like this because all they're doing is selecting data from it. They aren't doing like updates or deletes or drops or anything like that. That would compromise the data. But when you do your homework, it might like be really helpful to copy these over. And we'll do that. We'll do that in the last hour. So it's a good question. Did I say that too far? Yeah, and then customizing these IDs the way you like them, that makes you most comfortable. So I don't know. Sometimes these have ways to change fonts and font sizes. You configure. Maybe not. I don't see one that's obvious. You can, if you really wanted to, do this in your own text editor like I use. Notepad++. Of course, I wrote soccer notes in there and stuff, but you can choose the language as SQL and then just write the same query in there and then customize all your fonts and then put it in here. I've actually seen that before. So it looks a little bit different, right? It's using a little bit different font and color scheme.
What's that called? Notepad++?
Yeah. And then you could do all different languages like Python, PHP, use some PowerShell, Java, JavaScript, JSON. It's useful if you're switching between languages a lot. C++, C#, even obscure ones, I think, in there. All right. Give everybody a couple more minutes before we finish up and do some exercises. Just trying to see in my notes where we get the case statements. I like having the two screens. That. Just opening the syllabus. There's always something every time I go through the class, no matter how many times I do it. I feel like changing it up or putting something somewhere new. I don't know why we don't do. I don't have case statements in this one. Might do it. We do it for sure in class 5 when we start cleaning data. It becomes really useful in identifying little things and values you want to change it to. So you could say, if address contains, or case when address contains ST, then street, and say you return the value of street or avenue or boulevard. If you find certain things in a string, then you could say case when that happens, then choose this value instead, and then return that result. So we'll get to it. I guess we don't really use them until that point. Oops. Is everybody online, or we'll give Ronnie a minute to use
Oh,
her
you're
restroom?
fine. I've got this class once, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. Is everybody
Don't wait on me.
online good to move forward? Let's give it another 2 minutes. Of course, if you want to learn more, drop this in the channel too about all these functions. We've just started with aggregate functions and we'll stop with these other ones. So comparison functions, control flow, date and string. These are what I called scalar functions. Window functions are really advanced. Like it does a calculation, like rolling calculations over columns. Kind of hard to explain, but if you're doing like, if you have something that's an average and you're doing a moving average over it, where you're trying to do the sum over the last 10 rows. And then math functions, like we saw before. This is really good because it starts to tell you how you can use it, gives you good illustrations. Like doing the average by price over all products, or average by price or product line, and then you group by your product line. How you can apply counts, lots of examples. And I like supply chain because I feel like it gives me, and then the examples here, it really like lets me wrap my head around it. It like makes sense. Like your total revenue would be like the price, or your total cost would be like the price for each one times a quantity word.
This is just on my SQL tutorial.
Yeah. And then they have interactive, so you can try it out. And they have these data sets already loaded. Sample database. So they have their own database as like customer employees and stuff like that in it. Sometimes it gets a little more advanced because they're doing joins already, but it give you a pretty good idea of how this is working on the data. Not all of them are doing joins. That one's not. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen anymore. Sorry about that, everyone. It's online. Entire screen. Share my entire second screen. Okay. We just had one more person leave the room, so we'll get started here in a minute. I meant today to go through and leave comments on everybody's introductions and exercise that'll be my homework for the weekend.
I wanna try to get, I didn't want to bother my district supervisor on spring break, but I wanna get the data for all the counties and our school districts and see how we can build a seventh district that, in athletics, so, the class A is kind of outvoted by class B, C, and D because it doesn't represent our students in the metro, but how do you create a seventh district?
That'd be a great.
Without isolating schools within IPS, keep that, more schools in other schools, but
At least
still, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So this is a thought for everyone. So in previous classes, we did a class project with like video games, and we took and loaded that data and visualized it in Power BI. So usually I'll use SQL to go get the data out of like a system or a database, and then I import it into Tableau or a tool like that, and that's where I really like break it down and do the analysis and put it on a map and everything. So I have like a pretty good idea of the data that I want, and I write a query to get that data and then unload it in. I load in what I need so that I can really like slice and dice it and turn it, visualize it and stuff like that. Because once you get over 50 or 100 columns or rows, it starts to get hard to wrap your head around it. Anybody's head to wrap around it.
Well, we're trying to do it by participants too, so socioeconomic status, because your lower socioeconomic don't necessarily have the same participation rate that, private schools and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And you could write a bunch of queries to do that. You could write it by economic group or order it however you want. But I find it easy, like Tableau is like really easy to load it, and then you just do new tabs across all of it once you have that original data set that you want.
State website, I just gotta find where they're going, because there's a committee that's trying to look at how you slice and dice it and then sell it to the legislative, that they're gonna have to vote on. It's kind of like your, you know what I mean? Yeah. They're gonna have to vote on it to pass this. But if you can show how representation could be divided in a way that wouldn't be threatening, but give, based on the demographics of the state, it's just a little lopsided with Lincoln and Omaha being so heavily populated.
Actually, the other day I learned how District 66 became District 66. It's like right in the middle of Omaha. It's because Omaha didn't go that far out when they did it, and they included like rural counties. I don't know if they still do that or not, but that's how it became like its own orphan district inside of Omaha.
It was originally like the west side of Omaha.
Yeah. And then the farms, there were like farms
Let's be
out.
truthful, in the city that's segregated.
Yeah, I grew up in District 66 and like I recognize that privilege with a lot of the money from like Berkshire Hathaway coming into that district.
I call it that street corridor, from central
Yeah,
all the way west.
Because, like,
It's in DC too.
all their programs are
The bus systems don't go into the, the mall area, and Georgetown, they put population.
District shape is weird because of it, I think.
But this would be statewide, how you redistrict competition, you know.
So just adding some of my experience in there. That's how I do it. We'll learn views in a couple of lectures. A view is like a piece of code that you can save and rerun. But I usually do that to bring all the data together. And then I have like one big data set that I load into Tableau. And then I just slice and dice it there and create visualizations or trends or map it or whatever I need to do. Say SQL is great at like asking that one question or like getting that data that you need, or like especially like bringing multiple data sources together. Like you bring socioeconomics and zip codes together maybe, or and then
Participation numbers, capacity,
school district
School membership is how they usually divide the class. A,
bring
B,
students
C.
into it and summarize students
Mhm.
by district or whatever it might be, whatever system you have.
Well, I think there's some proposals out there, but again, it's people that don't have the data analysis other than, let's see how we can put it on paper and just deal with it in an Excel spreadsheet where the visualization would help.
And you can do it in Excel, and I shouldn't knock Excel because sometimes I do that just to do something really quick. But if you're like really exploring data, Tableau is great for that, or if you want to visualize it for somebody else. And you never want Excel to like become a solution because then you're like usually doing all these things to mess around to get that Excel sheet for people, and then you get stuck doing it. And then there are ways to automate it, like even through Tableau or using Python. Otherwise, you just pump out Excel port reports, and I've lived there. And you usually you want to do something more exciting, where you get tired of it or burn out of it. So a database it can be like a foundation of bringing data together much easier way. All right, we'll go ahead and finish this up so we can get to some exercises. Everybody is back now. Make sure I can bring up my notes for the class lecture. So we're going to cover the last two functions, then we'll do lots of examples. I'll explain the homework assignment. View slideshow. Okay, so we covered aggregate functions. Okay, control flow functions. I was talking about, I'm like, why don't we have case statements in here? And then I have case statement on the next slide. Say, I have to get in my own head there and be like, I probably did include that. Control flow functions. So what is the world population by continent? So you have some control flow functions. You also have ifs and if nulls, which are like actual functions like sums. But you can see now you have a case statement that's super powerful in SQL, because now you can go over this field continent, and then you can say when the continent is in Asia, Africa, Europe, or Oceania, then call it Eastern Hemisphere. When the right continent 7 is America, then Western. So what this right does, it takes the right 7 characters of the continent, and then either you're North America or South America. Well, in this table, I mean, you have Oceania. Well, yeah. Then continent else and is hemisphere. So roughly you're just taking North America and South America, even though there are ocean countries in the Western hemisphere, or else just keep it as the same continent in this hemisphere. So in this table, that actually grouped them up, all the countries up into the Eastern or Western hemisphere, whether or not 100% accurate, but it still illustrates like how you can use when the continent is in there. You can you're now creating your own field called hemisphere using conditional logic and even a function inside the conditional logic. Case statements are typically, I'd say I use them 80% of the time in the select statement to create a new column, but they could also be used in a where column. So like comparing the values that you create versus another value. And then you're doing that from the world country table, and then you're also grouping by that new column that you're creating. You can call this, you can alias this case statement as hemisphere, and then you can group by that hemisphere. So there's a lot going on in this one, but you can see is you can start to like really use the power of conditional logic in it. So no, did this make sense?
It's a lot.
So one thing I'll help here, let's go ahead and run data and then how you got to that, how I got to that.
I guess.
Let's see if I can pull this out. I think somebody left Oops, I didn't see someone was getting a different result from the code. I'll go back to that Rosendo here once we go to the exercises. Okay. Rosendo, those are the same results I got as well. Okay, we'll double check that. Go up here to PowerPoint examples. Then we have control.
Slide 10.
Should do slide 10.
Yep. Okay, so we have this control statement that's case when continent is in those countries, or when it's the continent is in those, then group them as Eastern Hemisphere or Western Hemisphere, because that's the new column that we're defining using case logic. If we run that.
Can you give how you cleared what was in there from our previous slide 9 and went to a new?
Oh, how I cleared it?
Yeah, I just don't remember.
Oh, I think I just selected all and
Selected all.
pasted over it.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But you could create a new tab
Okay.
and keep doing these. That's probably actually a good idea.
And to create a new tab is which?
Yep, this one with the plus. That's probably a good. That's not a bad idea.
So then we could say query, this is SQL file.
And then it leaves the other queries intact in the results.
So it's called an SQL file? Well,
Yeah, for now, when
paste
you
it.
click on this top left plus tab, it'll just create like
Okay.
SQL file 2, 3, 4
Okay.
until you save it and give it a name.
Okay, got it. Lightning bolt runs it.
Yep.
Total population, hemisphere, western, eastern, and Antarctica, right?
So to help you out with this, let me show you.
Yeah, I got it on that. But understanding what the.
Let me
word
show
says.
you. It always helps to look at the original data to see how you got to this result. So if we just do select star from world.country.
Oh, cool.
So select star, remember that's to get all the columns from world.country. We don't have to group by. And you could do limit. I like to do this limit.
I get it.
100.
Listing out North America, South America, it says if the last 7 letters equal America, then it's Western.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. You probably said that one, didn't you?
I did. I made it like I was overthinking, and I'm like, well, like what about Cuba or things like that? But it seems to work for this table.
I couldn't figure out why we would put
I just put that.
7 in there. I was like, I couldn't figure out the 7.
So it's a left function on a string, and it got the 7 characters, and if that is equal to America with 7 letters, then you put it in that continent. So I did in that hemisphere. So they have continent here. So it goes from this one actually goes left. It was right 7. Yeah, right 7. So there's a left and right string function. That's an example of a scalar function. This one actually goes from the right, and it goes 7 characters from the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. America. And so it would say, if you did this one, it would put it in Eastern Hemisphere, Asia, Western, Africa. It put in Western, North America, it put in Eastern. I could actually put the case statement next to this, and that'll be a good example.
That makes sense. Like if you have a huge list of, say, like social security numbers or something, and you want it like everyone was the same. That's like our location. I don't know. That's just an example.
Yeah.
That would be useful. Like here, it feels like weird because it's like, well, there's only like 3 other choices, and that's why I didn't connect it first. But then, if you were to like, I need every customer who has like this prefix in their customer ID or something. You pick like left, whatever, right?
Yeah, and you can.
That makes sense now. Okay.
You can see when yeah. See when I do.
So you can do like comment and comma and put like 3 and then put equal or something like that.
Yeah, you can shorten it, and as long as there are no other countries that end in that, they're probably Jamaica. Jamaica would work though, I guess, because it would be in the Western Hemisphere. So this will be here at the end. Let me get rid of some of these columns so we could just select name continent.
And then it gives me the 7 column. It's so much easier when you see it.
Yeah. No, this is good. It kind of shows you the way I think about it's working my way around data, querying my way around data. Name. Let's do continent also. Continent should be good enough. I'll put all 3 of these together. So Aruba is America in the case statement, so it puts it in Western. And then you have this set if it's in Asia, Africa, Europe, or Oceania. Oceania probably really isn't. What Antarctica, what ones are in it? Samoa, that's really Western Hemisphere, but for this exercise, it's illustrating a purpose. Australia would be Western Hemisphere. So it doesn't quite work, the groupings, but you get the idea of the case statement. And you group data a lot when you're doing analysis. That's one of the keys of doing analysis is grouping, either merging it together, grouping it together, or doing both to gain new insights in analysis. Like we're just talking with Ronnie's, if you grouped it together by demographics and school district to see like what the distribution is. And then you could import that into Tableau and visualize it or do whatever you need. Look at it over time.
Question. So when you do like a case win, you can like switch it basically and then do when you left and just do the opposite.
Yeah, so left would go it would take a look at the continent and it would start from the left. How many other digits you wanted to
It's just,
do on left.
yeah.
So you could look at the first three and if it's equal, you could expand this out if continent left continent is equal to AFR, then Eastern. And then you could do this a whole bunch of times. If left 3 equals EUR, then Eastern. So you can make this could become like a huge list. I've done that before, like you're checking all these conditions.
Right.
And if it's like in this condition, then label it this. Or this is also valuable too to return continent, or sometimes I'll put oops there because I'm forgetting to group some records. Like if there's just a huge list of values to group, it's like a new exception or something that I also need to group. Try to do that here. I think it includes everything. I think these two cover everything in this table, but just in case you're missing something with the first two groups, it would default to that. Oh, there we go, Antarctica. Because it's not in those continents, and then grade 7. Wouldn't be in America either. Guess Antarctica, I don't know if that might be true. Maybe Antarctica is neither Eastern or Western hemisphere because of where it sits.
Index hemisphere, like what?
Oh, what is the hemisphere?
No, it's like when you say in the as hemisphere, like how would you?
Oh, that's it. And then the as creates an alias and it calls the column hemisphere, which is returned right there. Otherwise, if you leave that, if you take that out,
Oh,
or it actually here puts that whole case statement in there. So I give it a nicer name
okay.
by using that keyword. Did anybody in the anybody online have questions? Yeah, so it becomes powerful in what you can do. Imagine having to do that in Excel. You could do like a pivot table, I guess, or you could write like a big nested if statement, but it becomes kind of messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have to go back and then do a bunch of matching. And then if you have a report like that, then you have to do that every time you do the report, where you could just do it in SQL instead. Yeah. So,
Your column, showing case form.
oh, because I took hemisphere off of it. That's what happens if I don't have as hemisphere.
Those things.
Oh, okay.
It names the column.
That's what
it,
you're saying.
it makes it so much easier when you.
Yeah, when I put that back, it puts hemisphere on there.
Okay.
And in time on doing these and then giving exercises. Let's go ahead and keep moving with, as long as there's no objection from anybody online. I have about 40 minutes left, but we only have one more. Actually, what? Move this back to slideshow. All right, scalar functions. This is where I talk about where it does this value by value. It goes through the scalar function, will go row by row, and it'll create a value based off of a column that you define inside the function. Country, it does year of independence. And this one, instead of using a column, we just use a string value. So we do the year, and then we're casting the string as a date. There's a lot going on here. This is what I mentioned at first. So like the cast function is one that is like a type function where you could take a string that's in a date format and then convert it to an actual date and then do the year of the date. So if you cast 1991, 1/1/1991 as a date, you'll get, how would you get the year 1990 there? I would think that'd be 1991. And then and that's all the results it returns, right? Where independence year is greater than or equal to, and this would evaluate to 1991, and then by independence year descending. So basically, in a lot of words, what countries claimed independence after 1991. So if we ran that, I'm sure that start year would actually be 1991. Probably just pasted some wrong result in there. So we can do this one as scalar function. So instead of doing this as text, it could be another column. You could compare it to another column like if it's in a string and you convert it to the date and get the year out of it. But we'll go ahead and run this. Yeah, execute. I'm pretty sure this was going to say 1991 instead of 1990. Yeah. I'll make a note to update that slide. That's the only difference. It should actually show 1991. Then it's limiting the rows where the independence year is greater than or equal to 1991. I thought this was interesting because these are like, that was the year right after the Berlin Wall fell and like the Russian, they split all these countries. Soviet bloc split from USSR.
Computer science and history.
Yeah. You can learn doing your research.
Yes.
Yeah, they declared independence right after that. I'm old enough for that. That's how old I am.
Berlin Wall.
I was like, 9 years old. I remember it on TV.
Yeah, it was nice. So, I
I
mean,
was
well,
on vacation.
did it start in 89?
It's November
It
11th.
started.
Because I was born on the 24th, first of 89. That was like 9 days before the wall fell. I don't know why this is in my head, but
I remember it being a big deal, but I didn't. I was too young to like really get it. But it was all over TV.
Yeah.
It was a huge deal because of Cold War.
I guess I'd be like you with the World Trade Center.
I remember. I'll never forget that day
You
either.
line up people who remember Kennedy being shot, his son
Yeah.
died in an airplane crash, or the uncle running for president.
So, yeah, it
Who
didn't fall
remembers which ones, and then you can tell.
89,
Yeah.
November 9th, 1989. That's what Google's, the Google's.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause George Bush was on. He says, "Tear down this wall."
Mhm.
Wasn't that Reagan?
Reagan was. Yeah, he said it, and then gosh,
Reagan.
but Bush would have been president at the time. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like a different lifetime ago. Anyway, I digress.
Anyway, we are here to learn.
I tangent on that. Have a little bit of fun. Okay, let me get over here. Oh, hopefully it didn't freeze up again though.
No.
I'm kind of seeing what StreamYard's doing here though. Here, maybe I can do a trick here. I'm gonna drop that for a second. Stop screen. Maybe I can get back to that. Oh man. I don't want to have to restart my computer here. There's my SQL workbench. What if I close that for a second? I closed it, but it still appears on the screen.
You do like the end task?
That's 12.
I did,
Oh, you did do it? Oh.
and it's like it's frozen on the screen. So what if I do this? What if I were just drop and refresh this connection? It's like something weird that happens in here to this connection while I'm doing it off this computer. I'll try a trick. Apologies for everyone. They're online. I have to do a little trick because screen froze. Screen froze here in person. Second screen. So if we duplicate. Then better here next time. Let's see this percentage change break duplicate. Be with everyone just in 1 minute. Change brightness. A side note, has anybody ever played pickleball?
Mm-hmm.
My daughter's school, they go just over here downtown to St. Cecilia, and they're having like a parents' pickleball night. And they're willing to teach everyone. I'm kind of intrigued.
You should do it. It's like one of the fastest growing sports in the world right now.
Next to girls wrestling.
It's crazy. Like they're looking like they're looking at,
I've seen how rapidly it expanded.
yeah, they're building
Crazy.
like they're converting
The
whole
courts out west.
stadiums.
Yeah,
It's
like-
insane.
Yeah, I definitely witnessed it just explode.
They're
Hey.
Yeah, that's what she
yeah.
Forgot what I was doing on the second screen. Sorry for everyone online, just a technical issue. Okay. PC on TV. That's what I have been doing.
It's a third. It's a third one.
This is the second one.
It's a third one. It is a third one.
Oh, there is a third floor. Sorry, I thought you were
Yeah,
saying
there's a
this was
third
the third
floor.
floor. I'm like, no.
No, there is.
Yeah. No, I think the third is the top floor, but there's like a rooftop patio too. Like, I don't know. So I don't know.
My sister has a studio.
Oh,
I've never
here?
been to it. Yeah,
Oh, what's her business? Where is she? Not just.
yeah, artist.
Oh, what's her name?
Brandy and Lord.
Oh, I don't know.
She's in this office or right upstairs?
She has one upstairs. A
It's
studio.
kind of interesting. Like all over downtown, they have like tech co-working, but they have like a lot of creatives and marketing, and
Yeah.
then a mix here too.
Yeah, starting the last class when I first went in and.
Still trying to connect to this TV. I'm now having trouble doing it. Now it says this display is not available. Okay, well, I'll give everyone a 5-minute break while I restart my computer again. I'll find a better, I'll come in here and work on it for next week. I like this room, just gotta make the display work. I'm gonna restart the computer. I'll be back for everyone online in 5 minutes. See you then.
Thank you, Max, on your
Yeah.
computer or?
Top, like it works for a little bit, then it freezes, like it gets disconnected and freezes. From StreamYard. For anybody here is local, I practice exercises. So where we were at, that's really our last slide of the night. And I'll provide a recap here for the camera or for the cast here in a second. Sorry about that. All sorts of technical challenges tonight. I'll get that figured out in the next couple of days. before Monday. So I will finish up this lecture by giving a recap. I want to connect everyone to the practice exercises and then also get everybody set up with the homework assignment for the weekend. So not a huge homework assignment, just similar to the queries we wrote here on a different data set. And then we'll cover them. We'll cover the homework. We'll have everybody hand in their homework, their SQL files.
Like send it to you.
Yep. And then I'll look over the results and provide everyone feedback, and then we'll cover them first. All right, so I want to share my class 2 slides. Oops, not those class 2 slides. Let's see. Present. Class 2 writing queries. There we go. I feel like StreamYard also works the best if you're just doing everything off the same instead of 2 screens. Part of the challenge. Okay. Can everyone see online? Has somebody let me know? Just like yes out loud. Oh, you can see him here. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that was the last example that we had with scalar functions. So what did we cover in today? The common SQL clauses, just all the basics that go into single query, your query, your select, which gets the columns, your from, which selects a table. Those are the 2 required ones. And then you have where statements that limit it. You have group by that goes by aggregate functions like your sum, your average, your min and maxes. You have a having, which goes along with group by function. It filters out grouped results. What else am I forgetting? You have your order by and your order by and your limit, which sorts the results. That's a very last step in the results that you're returning. And then you have a limit that tells the database exactly how many rows you want to return. So what are the common aggregates and functions? We covered that with a list. There's a lot more out there. I have an additional resources slide. These are the common ones after the class 2 review. So these are really the common ones. And then you could go into MySQL tutorial. You could go through the guided examples, and there are even more than this. And if you're adventurous enough, you could just go out to, the MySQL technical documents. I always like examples quite a bit better than that. I'm like that too. They'll give you syntax and parameters that go into each one of these, which is good if you're doing really technical work. But usually I just like to see what, for like length of a function, how many parameters there are. You put in a column and you say 3, and it's like length of, is it equal to length of 3 or something like that. But anyway, this MySQL tutorial will provide good examples on that. And yeah, how do you utilize comments for debugging or explaining code? That's where you can use the pound sign in your code to be able to do that. All right, additional resources. This one was really nice. There's a SQL cheat sheet for this class. There's a basic query syntax with with all of your commands there, your select, your from, where, order by limits, all of your operators. We covered arithmetic. You can use comparisons in your where statements. Not usually use a lot of bitwise operators, but they include this in the SQL cheat sheet. But definitely the logical, where you use and, between, exists, in, like, not, or. You can use those both in the where clause or like a case statement in your select. And then lists of the different functions. I found this cheat sheet to be really nice. This is one that you can print out.
Is that in the Slack? Or where's that?
This is in the writing queries, here in the writing queries slide.
Okay.
And there's a LinkedIn, there's a sheet, SQL cheat sheet. And this guy's right. So I go to this and says 95% of the SQL you need as a data analyst can be summarized in one page. And I think they have stuff that we haven't covered on it yet, but it's like a really good start for the rest of the class. So they have like all your commands and clauses. They have some examples like of queries like we did today. The order of execution was what I was talking about. It does like a from the tables, and then where, and group by, and having, and then select. It actually goes in a different order than I said out loud. Data definition language will be your create, alter, and drop. We'll start doing that in the next lecture on Monday. Data manipulation language, same thing. The DDL and DML, start to do that. Then all of your commands and clauses. So if you were someone doing advanced DBA work, you'd probably use most of these, but I think he's right on target. Of what you'll do, you'll select or manipulate some data, alter a table, or update or insert new information, or functions, and you're joining data, and then all right. So I would like to do the. Somebody mentioned copying a table over to their own schema. And this is a way to do that. The objective is to copy the US zips and calendar tables to your own, the world US zips and the world calendar tables. Sorry. Is it still good? If I So syntax that you can use, I don't have an example for this one yet. But if you use whatever the name of your schema is, mine would be J, like are aware to, or anybody else's. Work on. And you'll learn more about some of the it says drop table exists in your schema, and then that table you can drop a table that says J Bergman US zips or use your schema, everything from US zips. So this piece of code, what it does, it uses your schema, it drops, and this should be J Bergman US zips. It'll drop the table if it already exists, and then it'll create a table using all the information from US zips. So I probably not necessarily required for this first homework, but you may find it useful to take a table out of the world database and then just copy it into your database and work with it that way. So that way, if you mess anything up, you can always just recopy it. You can drop the other table and then you can recopy it. Say in the next lecture, you delete the records or you drop the table by accident. You delete some information or you change some information. And it's not like the original information that's in the table. You could just refresh it this way. So I just wanted to share that because it'll likely be helpful as you do the homework assignments. Not required, but useful. So here are the practice exercises I talked about. These are purely practice. These aren't the homework assignment. This isn't the homework assignment. These, the answers to these practice exercises here, they are in the file in Slack under class 2 exercises. So I provided these as a way for you to work on these, but also see what the solution is so you can get a feel for how they would be answered. And then you could always play around with them and change them and do different things, which then will help you on your homework assignment. So for homework 1, I put these basic query structures. So we're trying to do 2 different types of queries. So there's the basic query syntax, which generates a list. So that's where you're just selecting columns and a bunch of values. Or you're doing the aggregate queries where you're summing over a column. I have 8 questions here. And I'm going to drop the file for that here in Slack also. Let's see. So I want to go to give everyone this SQL file. I have a template for it, so you don't have to worry about creating your own SQL file. You'll be able to see what this looks like. So I'm going to drop this into Slack now. It's called Class 1 Homework Template. And then it'll have those same questions. And then you can write the SQL code to get that data right underneath each one of those questions. Just making sure does everybody online also follow the homework? Just anybody shout out if you don't. All right.
So you just posted it in Slack just to.
Yep.
All the template.
Yep.
Okay.
And so you'll fill that out, send it to me before class on Monday so that I can review it and provide you some feedback, and then we'll cover the answers. And it'll give you some opportunities it'll be on a pass fail basis, but it'll give me an opportunity to see what we could work on as a class as much as anything. And then for next lecture, what's coming up is extracting and storing data. I provided that as a final slide here, so you can get a heads up. So you can get a heads up and pumped up and excited about what we're gonna cover next week. So a lot of what I was talking about, DDL and DML, data definition language, like defining tables and those structures that you put data in, and data manipulation language. It's like you're starting to insert records into a table, and update and delete records.
Are you sharing a screen?
Yep. Yeah, you can just drop it into Slack. That would be fine. If you wanted to personally message me, I think that would be great. Bianca, I see your question. So I need to go back and answer some questions here that I've been putting off. So Bianca, you could do a direct message to me in Slack with your SQL code, and that will work. So the answers to, and Carmen, the answers to the practice questions, if you scroll up in the SQL 101 Spring 2024 channel, the name of those is the Class 2 exercises dash queries JB1. And it probably, I'll go ahead and share that part of the screen here. Let's just go ahead and share my entire screen. This will be crazy for a second. So Carmen, that is this file up here in the channel. It's examples, class 2 exercises, queries JB1. And those correspond to all of the questions that are asked in the practice exercises in the class 2 lecture. Let me in this slide right here, the practice exercises with the Geico lifting bros. So number 1 through 6 be the same as in this file. Let's see what else. Yeah, okay, I missed some of your comments. I forgot what we were talking about with taking lessons.
Pickleball.
Let's see, what else do we have? I know a couple people were getting a different result using the code. Let's see if I still have this query, Rosendo. Oh, you play it. There we go. I was thinking an instrument or something. I'm like, took lessons. What were we talking about again? That's a sidebar. Has a little bit of a class having fun or distraction.
Mm-hmm.
Happens to me all the time. I have 3 girls. They're easy distractions, easily distracted. I'm interested in it. I might just go do that on Friday. Okay. So let's see. Pop. I may have deleted that query that I had before with that. Let's see if I can get back to it. That continent and name and sum of population. Let's see if I can back into it. If I can undo, I've restarted my computer since then, so probably not. You can just, that's a good question, John. So you can just send me the code and I'll run it myself. And I'll compare it to the code that I have and your results and provide feedback on it. So just your queries, and I'll execute them in MySQL Workbench. Just make sure that they work in MySQL Workbench. And they should work in mine.
How do we look at the larger
Was he done already?
Database.
You're done. That's some wizardry to be done with it already. Maybe I don't know if you sneak peeked at it before class or anything, but that's pretty quick.
Who finished it?
See, I shouldn't have said he did personal message me, but it was a good question that he asked. Is like, where do you want to copy the homework queries in Notepad and send it to you, or export the console? The SQL queries just fine itself. So Rosendo had a question, where do we get the database for our homework from? It's a world database that it should be loaded into your login. If it's not, Rosendo, I'll take a peek at it, but if it's not, if that database is not visible to you, I need to make it visible to you to do the homework. So I'll take a quick peek just to see. Yep, Rosendo, if you can still see the screen, it looks like you have the world database there, and you would just like to do a query. I think this one includes the US zips and calendar tables. So you'd say like select star. I'm just doing this real quick. From US zips. And I'm logged in under your account right now. If we run that. Oops, I do need to put world.us zips on there to refer to the world database. That's how you would get the results out of there. And then for the homework, you'll write different queries from that table to get the results that you need to answer those questions.
Check for parking.
Say that
Again.
again.
So Rosenda's question was, what database should we be using for the homework?
Yeah.
So I have to do that in order to do the homework?
Yeah, or to use the world database.
I gotta put that in.
No, it's in there.
It's low. It's
So
in there, right?
how you would do it from your profile, I'm just logged in as
Okay, so I don't have to do that.
Rosenda right
Just
now.
like the code and like pull it. Like,
Yeah,
just
And then you
do
say
that.
select star from
Yeah.
I
database.table.
was making sure. I'll see you guys.
And then you should be able to answer all your questions, a combination of using the US zips table and the calendar table. Does that make sense to everyone in the channel? Presented, did that make sense to how you would answer the questions? Okay.
I'm getting errors from running any of that.
You're getting errors?
Yeah.
Let me check it out.
Oh, world, I guess it's.
Yeah, so you have to set when you do a from statement. We didn't cover this today, but the syntax for it is database and then period table. So world is the database, and then the table that you're getting it from is US zips.
US zips. That's the table?
Yep, within the world database. So it's from database
Is there like
table.
I guess the biggest throwing me off on this code is that like writing the syntax for what those columns are,
Yeah.
like US zips. Like where do we know that information? Or find that information?
If you go over to schema, this will help you out.
Oh, okay.
And then you could expand the world database. And then expand tables. That Explorer gives you a good way to
Okay.
see all the tables. So what I says
Okay, I'm just I'm like,
showing Maz here
which column or
is
which
that
table?
how to know like what database or what tables to select from, you go over to the schemas tab, and then you can see your own. You can see your own database,
Yeah.
and then you can see the world database, and then the tables underneath of it. And then if you wanted to see the data, you could right click it and say, show me the first 1,000 rows, and it give you the data in the table. Oh, what else am I missing here?
Hey, Jeremy.
Awesome.
Hello?
I owe Douglas setting up. I owe you setting up that software. The dbeaver. If you'd like to set up we could try and go ahead and do that tonight so that you have it. Otherwise, I can make myself available anytime the next day or two, whichever you prefer, to try to set up dbeaver in your own ID. That or go the laptop route if we could get a hold of Nate. Did
Can you
you
hear me?
Yeah. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, so I figured out how to run queries, and I've been running them. So
Oh, you have? Okay.
yeah,
Sweet.
quick question.
Yeah.
On the homework, when the first question says, "What are all the zip codes in the state of Iowa?" Do you
Yep.
want the amount, like the rows? Because I pulled up 970 different zip codes in Iowa, or do you want them all individual?
You could do them all individual, or you could use the count function. I'll accept either answer.
Okay.
I think that one was the intent to list all of them, but I would take either answer.
Okay.
Neither one of them are wrong when you're asking like how many counties are there.
I was just wondering if you wanted them like
Similar.
the total amount in Iowa, or just
Yeah, you can do that as a list. That was the intent. Like what are all the zip codes in the state of Iowa? Is to create a list using that basic query syntax.
oh, okay.
But if you did the count function, I wouldn't count it wrong or anything. Guess technically that'd be like how many zip codes are there.
Okay. Sounds good.
So yeah, sometimes like somebody will ask a question and it's up to the interpretation of the analyst and how they understand it too. So that's one of the things that it's always a good question to clarify when there's any doubt. Yeah, the same. Say I like this room. We just have to get it figured out. Yeah, I might bring a different lap time next time, or I'll figure it out over the next couple days. All right.
Just to make, you just want the code for each question, right?
Yep, and you can put it in that file, the homework one file that I just dropped into Slack.
Okay.
So yeah, that's the idea is like it has all of those questions already listed and they're commented out, and then you can put the SQL code right underneath of it.
Oh, okay, that works.
And then you can just direct message me. You can direct message me when you're done.
Okay, that works.
Okay.
And I have a quick
Am I
question
missing
too.
anything?
Can you
I
hear
was
me?
going to run that query and see why we were getting different results, but Rosendo and somebody else mentioned that, where we were grouping continent and
It was me.
yeah, there are a couple people who are getting different results. Unfortunately, I copied over that, but let me see. How we would get different results here. Oh, you know what? So this query, okay. So in the name column, it's just giving you all the word name, right? So what I did is I put the back. So when you put single quotes on a name, the MySQL interpreter thinks that's a string. So what I do is I put the backticks on the name, because name is like a reserved word in MySQL. And can both of you see my screen right now? In MySQL Workbench? I need to make
Yeah,
sure
yeah,
that
I
you
can.
see it. Oops. Probably not that way. Can you see MySQL Workbench right now?
I can.
I can, but I don't think you can hear me.
Okay. I can hear you. So if I run this with these backticks on it, I get the country names. When I ran it the way you guys did with those single quotes, you see how they changed those to orange, and the MySQL interpreter thinks these are a string. So then it just puts name in all of those.
So I was looking for the back quotes on my keyboard, and I don't know why I can't find them.
Do you have a Mac laptop?
No, I have a Windows.
You have a Windows? Typically, mine is to the left of the number 1. And I bet it's
Oh,
different.
I see it. It's there. Yep, I see it.
So it's like, next to the tilde. You don't have to press the caps. It's a weird thing because they don't want to use the single quotes, but they want to denote like that it's still like a field name. So it's better to not choose column names in your table that are like reserved keywords, but we have that for this table. So I think we come up against it once or twice in the rest of the class. And this is just a MySQL thing that MySQL does this specifically.
And I have another quick question too. In the code that you dropped into the chat, sometimes there's a dot continent, and sometimes there's just continent. Like, what's the difference? Like, when you look at lecture 4, and it's where the where is, and it says where a dash continent equals North America, and then in lecture, oh wait a minute, and then the bottom slide 17, it says where there's no a, it just says continent equals Asia. Like, what's the difference?
Oh, you're looking inside of the slides? Is that where you're pulling it from?
I'm looking in the document you dropped in the Slack.
Okay. I'm finding it here with you. So examples, PowerPoint.
Yeah, so look at lecture slide 15.
Slide 15 from lecture 2.
Okay, you see the where, and it just says continent.
Yeah.
Well, it says a continent. I can't see if you're looking at the same thing I am.
Oops, can you see
Yeah,
slide?
it's really small though.
Okay, let me make that bigger.
Okay, so I'm looking at, which document am I looking at here? Okay, lecture queries, PowerPoint SQL 1. And then lecture 4.
Oh, you have these A dots.
Yeah.
So we haven't got to this part yet, but you can also put aliases on table names. So not just field names, you see the as statement.
Yeah.
So we put the name as country, but you can do that also with tables. When this becomes important, it's more so when you have multiple tables in a query.
Oh, I see.
And it
It's
becomes
kind of
important,
like, yeah, it's kind of like HTML where you have to like reference. I get what you're saying. Yep.
Yep. So when we join them like that way, you can say it's from like table A, that field, and the other one is from table B. Sometimes that becomes really important too when you're joining on keys and they have like the same field name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that
I
might be Spanish at this point, but
get that now.
if you're like merging, if you're combining two tables, you always want to try to find a similar key. And if the field names are the same, it may not be able to tell what table it's from. So you alias them to say this one is from the world.country table and this one's from the world.country language table. It's a way to, sometimes you have to do it. You have to give it well, you could use this full word. You could go, I'm getting in the weeds here. Instead of using a in the field name, you could do world.countrylanguage.name. So you did database, table name, field name. But the A's and the B's make it shorthand. And I personally find it a lot easier to organize my code when I do that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Not as important until we get to that point, but another way that you can use aliases in SQL. Am I missing anything else? I'm here until 9:30, so feel free to continue to ask. Just looking back through the Slack messages. Thanks for everyone's patience today. We'll third time's a charm here, getting everything perfect or near perfect. Corrected blank. I think that's it. Rosinda dropped me the same code. I did forget to take attendance today, but just about everyone was here. I need to do that right away before I forget. We are on our way to greatness here with learning SQL and being on our way to working with it.
And we're able to sign off, right? I'm going to work on this later.
Yeah, no problem. I'm available here. I'll always be available for 30 minutes after 9 for like an office hour. I don't think I put that in the syllabus, but I am available after class and most of the time before 5:30, from 5:30 to 9:30. And then you could hit me up anytime. I may not get to you right away on Slack, but I'll try to answer it as timely as I can.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Have a good night. Right. And that concludes class 2 on writing queries for Omaha Data Science Academy. The next class we'll work with DDL and DML, and we will see you then.